Good morning, Nation. John here. Thank you very much, as always, for being here this morning. And if you're new, again, consider subscribing. It's truly appreciated. So let's get into a nightmare on Wall Street. This is not PG-13, son. This is a scary, scary story, and I'm going to tell you why. It doesn't have Freddy Krueger in it. It's got Joe Krueger, I guess we'll say, in the crappy Christmas sweater, whatever it is Freddy wore. I think this is the scariest of them all because I think this is most likely to happen and very soon here in the United States. So just to let you know, heads up, I believe, and I've said this previously, I believe an economic crash is coming. Not an economist over here by any stretch of the imagination. Do not take economic advice or financial, advice from somebody in a Marriott hoodie from Rule King, son. Just saying. But I'm going to go over some numbers in a minute, and I'm going to try and make it make sense so you know where my reasoning's coming from. Not only do I think that an economic crash is imminent, I think it's going to be, it's going to go hand in hand, if you will, with a brand new digital economy. Now, I've heard it called Fed coin. As of late, I've heard it called Fed Now, and I've gotten several messages over on Patreon from people that are saying, it's expected to, the process is expected to begin sometime this summer. So I dug around a little bit, and this comes from moneymetals.com. They are financial experts, not me, moneymetals.com, so y'all can go check them out if you choose to do so. But they are reporting that the Fed coin is coming soon. Now, again, as of filming this, it's called Fed Now, but that's probably just a prelude into what it's eventually going to become, an all-digital economy here in the United States of America. And they make two specific points as they report on this, okay? Number one, let me just say this up front, okay? I like the idea of blockchain because I know that we have blockchain fans out there, and we have crypto fans and Bitcoin and Litecoin fans and all that. I like that idea. And the reason I like that idea is it circumvents regulation. I would rather hold stuff in my hand. Because of this, I like precious metals better. I prefer silver or gold if I'm feeling very spendy. It's usually silver, 1 ounce at a time. That's how I roll. But I prefer to hold stuff in my hand, but I understand the reasoning behind blockchain. User to user, hey, we don't need no stinking bank, this sort of thing. But the issue is central banks, they like neither. Because again, both are outside of the realm of regulation. As of right now, they can't get in there. And as a matter of fact, when I went and had my taxes done with my wife, she was very specific with some of these questions. Do you have Bitcoin? Do you have blockchain technology? Maybe in an account outside the United States? And what that was they want to know if you have money they don't know about because they want to tax it. They want to regulate it. And that's what's so beautiful about the concept of Bitcoin. But Bitcoin is tanking, and I believe eventually it's going to be regulated. Same thing with precious metals, okay? Central banks don't like either one. And this article goes on to explain a couple of things, and I agree that the government will begin to, very soon, regulate cryptocurrency, meaning they're going to step in, they're going to begin to tax it, they're going to want to assume control of stuff like Bitcoin. Using that as an example because it's the biggest one, but honestly, there are hundreds. Atari, the video game company Atari even has their own, or they did. I don't know. I don't have any of it. and they're going to begin to demonetize cash, meaning cash money at some point is no longer going to be an option. There will be a grace period where they're like, hey, you can turn this in for numbers on the screen, or stores will continue to accept this for a while. But at some point, they're not going to accept it. You're going to need a card or an application on a phone or a watch or something implanted up here in your temple or something like that. Y'all know where I'm going with that. But in order to fully push this thing through, they need a good reason. They need a good excuse. Okay. This is my theory anyway. I think the pandemic kind of got the ball rolling. This is something we can blame the recession that we're in on, even though they say we're not in a recession. Son, we in a recession big time. We can blame the economy on the pandemic. Self-inflicted. You shut everything down, controlled demolition style. But to build off of this theory just a little bit, because there's some people out there like, well, he's just one of those old conspiracy theorists, son. Maybe they're not saying son. Roosevelt, back in 1917, good old Roosevelt, and I say that with sarcasm, he signed Executive Order 6102. And what this did is it outlawed the hoarding of gold. So hoarding of gold, their definition of hoarding back in the day, back in 1917, was you could not withdraw gold coins and then hang on to them. You were to basically spend them immediately, get them back in circulation, take from the bank, put them back in circulation so the central banks, once again, they have possession of the gold. They can't have you holding on to the wealth for very long. And then according to this executive order, again, 6102, for anybody that's interested, he signed it again in 1917. If you had gold coins, you were to deliver them to a Federal Reserve Bank by May 1st of 1933. So there was a grace period here, okay? And this is relevant to the conversation. There was a grace period, and I think there's going to be a grace period with fiat currency. It's not even really money at this point. But what they did, sometimes you'll hear me call it a shell game. It's a scam, okay? So at one point in time, Americans had true wealth. They had gold coin, they had silver coin. They took all of this. They passed this executive order. Hey, turn this in. We are now going to give you paper vouchers or certificates that say you own this amount of gold, even though legally you cannot own it anymore. And then eventually they came off the gold standard completely, and they switched from those vouchers, from anything being backed by gold, to now we're on the petrodollar, and it's just backed by imagination at this point. They've stolen the wealth from this country, is the point I'm trying to make. They've done it deliberately. It's been a very, very long-term strategy to keep the rich, and the working class, us peons. So I say this, the economic collapse, the Nightmare on Wall Street is going to be the most likely scenario, and here's exactly why. Our country, as I film this, the United States, we have a total national debt of $31.3 trillion. Let me put this into perspective for you, okay? I had to use a calculator for this, son. The annual tax revenue here in the United States of America is estimated at $4.71 trillion, which means we can pay this national debt off through collecting taxes the way we do now in 6.5 years. But during that 6.5 years, we are going to have zero money for any kind of spending whatsoever. So for 6.5 years, we cannot fund the police, we cannot fund the military, we cannot fund schools, we cannot build roads, we cannot fund fire departments, we cannot give out food stamps, we cannot give out Medicaid, nothing. No federal funding for 6.5 years. Realistically, the United States can never do that, because can you imagine the chaos during that 6.5 years? And can you imagine what shape our country would be at the tail end of that? There's no possible way on God's green earth at this point that we can pay back $31.3 trillion. Not only are we not paying it back, we continue to spend more than we get in terms of tax revenue. I mean, look, Ukraine, just saying, look how much we're spending there. Look how much we're spending on people that are not supposed to be in this country to kickstand these people up. We're broke. We're way beyond broke. Um, and this is a total shift event when this happens. All right. And because it's a shift event, and again, it's going right into the playlist. There's a new playlist on the front page of the channel now. You need to prep with a plan as if you're prepping for a shift event. All right. Things are going to be a little bit different. Yesterday, we were talking about milk sandwiches, and that one, does need some planning, but this one's going to be a lot more dangerous because it's a lot more long term. So, what can you do? What are some things that you can do right now to prepare for an economic collapse? So, number one, be debt free, or be as debt free as possible. I understand that not everybody is going to be able to be debt free. I get it. This country, people are living in debt. They're up to their waist in debt, drowning in debt, as you'll hear it sometimes in the media. But try and pay off as much debt as humanly possible, because interest is no good. Don't care what the percentage is. Interest is no good. You're just throwing money away at that point. Okay. And I'm the pot calling the kettle black. Okay. I have student loans. There's interest on that. I didn't get to go to college for free, and I don't expect anybody else to pay for it. I signed up to go, so I'm trying to pay that off. You can own land. Very hard to do right now. Land costs quite a bit of money. And again, it's going to require a lot of people out there maybe to go into debt for land. So that's a decision you would have to make. Do the pros outweigh the cons in that situation? You don't really want to be in debt, but at the same time, land is where it's at. If you own land, you have some sort of freedom as long as you can pay the taxes on it. Otherwise, they come and repo it, and you realize you never owned in the first place, right? But I digress. The point is, if you have land, you have some freedom to handle your business. And finally, have at least one essential skill. One skill that during a collapse in the economy, a collapse in the system, if you will. Yeah, I mean, having water, having medicine, having your vices like tobacco, like alcohol, that stuff's going to mean a lot, and you can barter it, I think, pretty easily. You can barter this stuff off. But if you have a meaningful skill, if you can fix vehicles, for example, or if you can build things with your hands, you're good at construction, this sort of thing, that's a highly barterable skill. And that is something that you can trade for, stuff that you need during an economic collapse. And I would add this because I know people are going to add it in chat anyway, and it's really good. And it goes hand in hand with land if you don't have any. Produce as much as you possibly can. Develop the mindset of a producer and not just a consumer, which means, for me at least, during an economic collapse and reboot to an all digital economy, the less you need to buy at Walmart, the better, right? If you can produce stuff on your own, if you can learn to repurpose a lot of things, you don't really need a whole lot from the store. And this should be a long-term mindset, I think, for any preppers. But understand people will lose wealth and independence during a full-on collapse. I bring up Venezuela, and some people are like, son, that's not a good example. Venezuela is not nearly as big as the United States, but Venezuela is a prime example of what to expect because they were a rich country. They had a lot of the same luxuries as we have here in the United States. They fully embraced socialism, which seems to be what the United States is doing right now. And so there are a lot of parallels. The fallout was a lot swifter. I think it's going to take more time here in the United States. But again, I'm a dude in an air yacht hoodie. Don't take take it with a grain of salt. But I think it's going to take longer. We're a much bigger country, so it will take longer to fall, and the fall's probably going to be nastier than it was in Venezuela. Life will be hard for most Americans because I don't know. I feel like I've heard it called in chat. We're becoming a third world country. I don't know if we'll completely be a third world country. I mean, maybe if Biden wins re-election, probably, but or thieves re-election or whatever you want to say. But I don't know. I just feel like the standard of living for most Americans is going to be so drastically reduced. It's going to be a shock to most people. Your non-preppers are going to be like, what's going on here? Yesterday, I was able to go out to Starbucks. Today, Starbucks is a swap meet. What's going on? This sort of thing. I think most preppers will be okay for that. But if you're not prepped for that, understand the fall is going to be hard when this happens. And because it's going to be such a hard fall and such a system shock for so many people, it's going to produce a dangerous social climate here in the United States. When people have a certain standard of living and then that falls down to absolutely nothing, they will become desperate, and desperation leads to violence in many cases, or it leads to criminal activity. And that's getting into home invasions. That's getting into knowing how to set your home up to where it doesn't look like you have a lot of money or a lot of things in your home. Kind of, the gray man theory, but doing that with your home. You don't want to live in a mansion and have beautiful plants, tens of thousands of dollars worth of plants outside when 10,000 people in your community just became homeless, because it paints a huge target on your back. You understand what I'm saying? Avoid technology when possible. And this is because I think Web 3.0 and for me, folks, let me know what you think in the comments, but I think it all comes to a head together. I think it's all going to be ushered in together again, hand in hand. I think we're going to have the economic collapse. I think we're going to have the Fed now or the Fed coin or whatever they choose to call it. And I think Web 3.0 and all of the AI and these applications, it's all going to be ushered in together or very shortly after one another. And we need to understand as preppers, this stuff is connected. And one is just as bad as the other, in my opinion. To give Warlord TV a shout out, he did a great live stream late last week, I think. He said, be ungovernable. So just because something is being ushered in, understand that this is my point of view on it, at least, Rob. Understand that they're going to expect minimal resistance, but most people are they're just gonna comply. Don't be one of those people. Be rowdy, be ungovernable, at every turn, cause chaos. You can do this legally and still, I'll give you a prime example. We were at the mall one day, and maybe this is bad on me, I don't know, but I was in there shopping with my daughter, and she already knows what to expect. We went in and we're checking out, and they want all this information, and they don't even ask anymore. They're like, it used to be, can I have your phone number, please? Now it's like phone number, and I said, I don't have a phone. Sorry. Email. I don't use the internet. They have no idea I'm preppernation. I don't use the internet. This person literally did not know how to check me out. And it tied up the line for like 10 minutes. People were pissed, but you can be ungovernable in the most petty ways. And I'm not going to lie, it brought a little bit of joy to my life because they don't typically run into people that say, oh, I don't have a phone. I don't use the internet thing. So what's going on? They don't think those people exist anymore. But I digress. Think about bartering first. So if and when we get into the Fed coin or the Fed now and everything switches to all digital, the only way you're going to be able to play below board, so to speak, is to barter, to exchange goods completely off the record. So get into the mindset where you're thinking about bartering first. At that point, it gets tricky because yard sales and flea markets and things. Imagine you're going to have to use a digital card at a flea market. That's the world that we're heading into. But if you bring some things that are valuable, maybe you're keeping them in your trunk or whatever, you approach the vendor and you're like, hey, I've got 10 ounces of silver out here. Would you be interested in exchanging stuff like this? Have that mindset. And if you have swap meets or flea markets or yard sales near you this summer, go try it out. People love to barter in those situations. Nothing at all wrong with it. But mainly have the things you need beforehand. So if you're gonna use a lot of power, you have a lot of property, and hey, I'm gonna need a lot of gasoline. I'm gonna need a lot of generators. 2 or 3 Haas, just huge generators. Why would you wait until the digital reset to get these things? Why would you not try and get them beforehand, pay with cash, and get out the store with these things so they don't know you have them? Finally, I just want to say cities are a place you will not want to live in during an economic collapse. There are several reasons, but again, getting back to Venezuela, cities were not a place that people wanted to be in because you have a concentration of desperate people. You're surrounded by threats at that point. If you're in rural America, for example, you're still going to have desperate people, but they're going to be spread out for the most part. Venezuela, they struggled with medical care. This was one of the things early on when the financial collapse happened. Doctors just weren't open anymore. Hospitals you couldn't get into. You could not count on medical care. You could not call an emergency number. If you did, somebody's not coming to pick you up. That sort of deal. These people were left on their own. They saw drastic changes in their diet, which is why sometimes at Prepper Nation we're talking about, maybe only eating 1 or 2 meals a day. Now, again, not a doctor either. Consult your doctor, especially if you have a special diet. But scale back on the calories that you're taking in, if at all possible, and get your body antiquated to that because it's coming. Not saying food is going to completely disappear, but during an economic collapse, that stuff is going to be mainly unaffordable. So either at some point you're going to have to forego like medication and stuff like that, light bill in order to buy food, or you're going to be consuming less. Okay. You're going to see, again, out of control crime, but especially in your urban areas because desperate people are packed on top of each other at that point. Think about, I know it's totally different, but think about Chaz and Chop and how several blocks got locked down and the police just did not respond. These sort of things are going to happen. I don't think they're going to try and build community gardens and things. It's going to be more of a warlords or strong arms kind of rising up and almost like gangs to an extent, running certain blocks of the city. You just don't want that. Understand that government doesn't go away. So I think a lot of people have this perception that when an economic collapse happens, the U.S. government's just going to float away into the netherverse or whatever you want to call it, son. That's not going to happen. All right. They've got contingency plans. They war game everything. If anything, the government is still going to be there and they're going to be draconian. They're going to have curfews put into place. They're going to try and limit your movement at that point. Just understand, especially, again, getting back to cities, it's not a place you want to be. And if you're in rural America, something else that Venezuelans saw, people fleeing in mass. And this gets into the argument of, well, Venezuela is not a good example because it's a smaller country. And it is. But what we saw is Venezuelans trying to get out of the country. So a lot of times they would have barterable things like silver. Just to give you an example, this silver would get their family fed and get them a ride out of Venezuela during all of the chaos. I think where the United States is bigger, more populated, I think what's going to happen is people are going to try and get from one region of the United States to the other, or maybe out of New York City and into, um, rural areas of Georgia, for example. They're going to try and get away from the chaos. So if you're in a rural environment, have what you need, but understand lots and lots of people are probably headed your way at some point. Anyway, what did I miss? Y'all let me know in the comments. God bless y'all for being here. Thank you very much. And if you are in the coffee club or on Patreon, we are having our live hangout about 11 o'clock this morning, give or take 5 or 10 minutes. But until tomorrow morning, y'all take care. God bless.